On the 8th day of Tradmas, the internet gave to us Ballerina Farm. Hello, and welcome to the 12 Days of Tradmas. If you're new around here, my name is Kit, and Tradmas is a series I do in December where I talk about the harmful beliefs and ideas promoted by certain influencers, content creators, and so on. Basically, my normal content, but more of it and with a festive flair. And today, we're discussing Ballerina Farm's collaboration with Evie magazine. Evie magazine is the TradCon answer to Cosmo, with all the questionable ethics that entails. See links below if you have no idea what I'm talking about. And Ballerina Farm is a farm in Utah, run by Hannah and Daniel Nealman. They have 10 million followers on Instagram, and per their storefront, they sell meat, baked goods, lifestyle goods, and flowers. They've attracted some attention this year, first by Hannah competing in the Mrs. World pageant 2 weeks after giving birth to her 8th child, and then by giving an interview to The Times. And for the record, I don't consider Hannah or Nara Smith tradwives. They're just Mormon influencers. Tradwives have a specific set of beliefs, and yes, some do overlap with religion, but tradwives can be secular. And at that, Mormons do believe that husbands are head of the house, and you can see that in the Times article. The thumbnail title for this video was almost The Dark Side of Submission, because everything Hannah decided, her husband overruled even before he was her husband. She didn't want to date him, at least at the moment, so Daniel got his dad to get him a seat beside her on a flight she was taking. She wanted to date for a year before marriage. They were engaged after a month, and 2 months after that, they were married. And though Hannah says they're co-CEOs and this is what she wants, quote, still, Daniel says, Nealman sometimes gets so ill from exhaustion that she can't get out of bed for a week. That doesn't exactly sound like someone living the life they want to me, but this video isn't about that article. It's about the Ballerina Farm collaboration with Evie magazine. But before we get into that, I just want to remind everyone that you heard it here first. In 2022, I posted the following to my community tab, and for context, at the time I was receiving a newsletter called Align, which was promoting a parallel economy for conservatives. The article read, if our basic principle is to develop more human and humane economic habits, what does that look like at home? We can start with food. This week, I want to highlight a business that brings clean, organic, pastured, humanely raised animal meats to your doorstep, and whose ordering process, unlike so many other bigger options, is managed by human people. Ballerina Farm is nestled in the fertile mountain valley of Kamas, Utah. Blessed with snowy winters and cool summers, livestock and humans alike enjoy this high-altitude oasis. The beautiful couple who started it, Daniel and Hannah, have an Instagram account that functions incidentally as brilliant pronatalist propaganda. Hannah is a former Miss New York City and a graduate of the Juilliard School in Dance. Daniel is a history major and finishing his master's. Their 7 children are wild, hardworking, and homeschooled by their mother. Through their Encore subscription, you can get mountain-raised meat from Ballerina Farm every 30, 60, or 90 days and support an inspiring young family at the same time. So I read that, and I checked out their Instagram, and I had a few thoughts. Preamble. I have no idea how I ended up receiving this newsletter, which is still true, which purports to help me stop buying from woke companies. It is very interesting though, so I don't think I'll unsubscribe just yet. And no, I have no problem with farmers, shopping local, shopping small business, etc. In fact, that's something I try to do in general. But this section raised my eyebrows in a few ways. They begin by claiming Ballerina Farm's meat is clean, organic, pastured, humanely raised. I find it interesting that they call the meat clean. Typically, people are seeking grass-fed, but they don't use that here, just clean. But I suppose it makes sense because per the FAQ on Ballerina Farm's website, their beef is grass-fed, except the last 4 months when they're also given grain, and their pigs are given grain year-round. And also per the FAQ, the grain consists of a mixture of corn, barley, soybean, and minerals, which, also per the FAQ, is neither certified organic nor non-GMO. Their FAQ also states they're not certified organic. Well, my mother certainly wouldn't approve. And then there's the beautiful couple who started it, Daniel and Hannah, have an Instagram account that functions incidentally as brilliant pronatalist propaganda. Brilliant pronatalist propaganda. Do these folks know there's someone out there misinforming people about their farm and also using them as posters for breeding? I know a lot of folks see someone who lives in the country, who farms, who has a lot of kids, and automatically assumes they're conservative Trumplicans, but Seriously, do they know? Because the food part was weird, but this is just creepy. And someone did recommend I check out The Edenic Allure of Ballerina Farms by Anne Helen Peterson, and I did, and yeah, I'll link it below if anyone else wants to read it. So, by partnering with Evie, I think the answer is they're okay with that. Now, I'm not spending $50 for a magazine in general, but let's look at the cover. This issue contains 2 interviews. Food babe Vani Hari, who has received criticism over the accuracy, consistency, and presentation of her claims, and Europe's shield maiden, Eva, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that, and I don't think I'll try, who propagates the Great Replacement theory amongst other things in her work as a right-wing activist. Hannah also shares the cover with the importance of being sexy, why society needs aspirational beauty, and given Evie's glee over the first blonde to be crowned Miss Universe in 20 years, I think we can imagine what their idea of aspirational beauty is. And then, of course, our cover model, Hannah Nealman of Ballerina Farm and the new American Dream. Evie did a promo for this. Let's have a watch. To be honest, that looks like the preview of a cheesy made-for-TV movie. None of that was an accurate depiction of farm life. And honestly, I don't think most Americans want to be farmers. It's a lot of work for not a lot of money, and it's not glamorous. In fact, it's dirty and the smell, well, there's a reason you always know when you're going by a pig farm. Though at that, I don't think the people who came up with this have ever been near a farm, let alone on one before. It was going to be unrealistic regardless, but why is Hannah sitting on straw with bare legs? That would be so uncomfortable. And why is she running after geese? I'm surprised the geese didn't go after her. Why is she milking a cow in a white dress? It didn't escape my notice that Hannah is in a dress for most, if not the entire thing, but a white dress? I know they're going for pure, wholesome milkmaid, but that's just so impractical. As is the idea that a farmer is milking cows by hand in a field, but I suppose they figure most people won't question, they'll just enjoy the image. Now, this isn't a deep dive. Several YouTubers have done one. I'll link all of them I know of below, but I did have a few thoughts when I saw this. Again, farming is not glamorous, nor is it lucrative. You will not be able to afford a $20,000 AGA, whatever, stove, or a $2,000 dress. A magazine will not approach you for a photo shoot or design a dress just for you. And I honestly doubt Ballerina Farm would even exist if Daniel Nealman's father wasn't the founder of JetBlue. Buying land is expensive, starting a farm is expensive. And though of course we all choose how we use socials, the difference between Ballerina Farm and, for example, Big Sky Caroline, a rancher in Montana, is striking. They do so much. Besides selling their products, which is admittedly more limited than the Ballerina Farm store selection, Caroline also runs cowgirl camps, goes on podcasts discussing the food industry, and they even opened their own brick and mortar store and sell local goods. And bonus, they don't show their kid's face. Caroline is also open and honest about how she's feeling and the stresses and financial challenges of doing all this. So, in conclusion, no, you won't get wealthy or famous by being a farmer. Everything you see on Ballerina Farm's socials, like everyone else's, is curated. And finally, I would like to read a post from the Ballerina Farm Snark subreddit about the harm facades like Ballerina Farms cause. It's not just harmless LARPing. How the Ballerina Farm facade impacts actual farmers and BIPOC farmers in particular, according to a farmer. Hello, Snarkers. I've been lurking on this subreddit ever since watching Jordan and McKay's deep dive into Ballerina Farm and want to share a bit of my perspective as a land steward, small farmer, as well as indigenous person. I promise that is relevant to the following info. So many of you here highlight and archive important things about BF that their viewers/consumers deserve to know, so thank you for doing that work. I hope the information I share helps inform some of the ways that their operation and romanticization of farm life impacts the real, underprivileged people who seek to work the land. Online ag influencing. Firstly, I want to mention that content creation is actually quite a beneficial tool for small farmers and gardeners, particularly for urban farms and gardens. A significant amount of urban farms and gardens don't produce enough yields to sustain the cost of production and a livable wage. Many of them rely on grants, loans, and volunteers. So content creation and farm consulting has been a beneficial tool for urban growers to help supplement their income, which can be especially helpful for BIPOC farmers with small farms since they are less likely to be able to purchase 300 plus acres in the United States. Farmers who also make content online typically have an audience of fellow gardeners and farmers, largely because working the land for a living becomes the biggest part of their life. I bring this up to say that if working the land was at the forefront of Hannah and Daniel's life, that would absolutely translate into their content. Look up any real agriculture garden influencer and you'll see the difference. What kind of invasive plants are on their land? How are they treating them? How are they preparing for the potential of H5N1 affecting their production? What routes do they take for animal husbandry? What integrated pest management techniques do they use to prevent the spread of weeds that are toxic to cattle? They're not entitled to share this aspect of ranching in their content. However, I think it's very telling that they don't. It could be because they genuinely don't interact with this aspect of their supposed lifestyle. It could be because they know it would break the, here we go, romanticization. It could be a mixture of both. I think we all agree that their farm lifestyle is a romanticized, unreal portrayal of what actual ranching/farming is. They're influencers first and foremost. What they are attempting to portray is not the lifestyle of someone who works the land for a living. The lifestyle Hannah is really trying to sell is a fantasy appeal to the so-called old ways of the world. But I'd like to remind you, who were the good old days really good for? Why BF tricking people into believing that they are ranchers for a living harms people working the land? Obviously, BF, or whoever they hired as a marketer, are quite talented at selling their lifestyle and thus make great sales from their audience. Luckily, many online have proved that the so-called Ballerina Farms meat that they sell doesn't even guarantee that it comes from the actual Ballerina Farm, and that the homewares they sell are all basically drop-shipped. However, they still make money selling this crap. From my perspective, they're ag grifters. Homestead LARPers. However, they're successful at it with a little help from that JetBlue money. Their success and fame inevitably will attract people to attempt to do the same grift. This is already a large problem with homestead/prepper content creators, many of which are problematic as it is. Every day, 2,000 acres of agricultural land are paved over, fragmented, or converted to uses that jeopardize farming. Things are bleak. If what little farmland remains is being split between actual farmers who feed us and influencers who want to be tradwives online, things will be even more bleak. Land access is a major problem, especially to BIPOC farmers. The U.S. lost a total of 1.9 million acres of farmland in 2022. We cannot afford to provide this scarce resource to rich folks who prioritize influencing over feeding people. I will go as far as to say it is extremely negligent of them to own 300 acres of land to use solely as a dairy ranch, but I'll touch on that more later. Tradwife, little house on the prairie aesthetic, cottagecore, whatever you want to call it, it can harm indigenous people. Before I get into this, I feel it's important to say I am Southern Indigenous. My family came to the U.S. as migrant farm workers. My partner who I steward the land with is Native American from a U.S. federally recognized tribe. Much of the Southwest, including the now state of Utah, used to be part of Mexico, meaning the encroachment, land seizing, and genocide toward the tribes of Utah happened by more than one settler nation, making the remnants of colonialism extremely impactful to this day. Early conventional agricultural practices and homesteads played a major role in colonizing the land. I'm not bringing this up to accuse Ballerina Farms of anything. I bring this up to mention that idealizing yesteryear cannot be separated from the fact that the farming of European plants and animals, aka conventional farming, and homesteading were used as tools of colonization. In fact, between 1891 to 1912, the government made reservation land set aside for Native Americans in Utah actually available to homesteaders. Americans stealing native land to give to homesteaders and farmers happened not as long ago as many might think, which makes their romanticization of early rural America all the more harmful. I'll include a link about this below. You might be thinking, mean, well, BF didn't buy this land on a Reservation or Homestead Act. How is this relevant? And I'd just like to add that the USA is native land, all of it. All of this continent was occupied by indigenous people who stewarded the native plants and animals. It is not up to Hannah and Daniel alone to make up for this dark history, but at the very least, they should not disregard/disassociate the dark history attached to their aesthetic and portrayed lifestyle. The lifestyle they romanticize is not going to solve society's issues like many of their followers like to believe. Being a farmer doesn't include having the traditional European gender roles and beliefs that they hold. If society at large were to regress, and yes, I choose that word intentionally, to their belief system and style of stewarding the land, that would be an act of neocolonialism, in my opinion. Farm to table and knowing where your food comes from is not exactly sustainable economically or ecologically. Everyone to some extent knows the American food system is not reliable in its current state. Even the USDA knows this, which is why they make grants available for conventional farmers/ranchers to make the switch to less ecologically harmful practices. We're losing topsoil in the United States like there's no tomorrow. There are many reasons why this is happening. Topsoil creation and preservation is a huge topic currently in ag communities and the USDA. Part of the reason this is happening is because of overgrazing and soil compaction caused by unsustainably ranching cattle. The videos Hannah posts showing off their land kills my soul. All of the grassy fields they have used to be habitat. Grasses have a shallow root system, which promotes compaction of soil, and are not nutrient dense. Having that much grass for literally no reason other than aesthetic purposes/lack of knowing how plants work is so incredibly fucking harmful to our ecosystems. You need healthy ecosystems in order to produce food. I'm approaching farm snark territory right now, new term just dropped, but having 300 acres to practice systems of farming that are recognized as harmful is certainly a choice. Using lots of land to produce mainly one agricultural product is also called monocropping. That term mainly applies to plant-based crops, however, they still severely reduced the genetic diversity of a whopping 300 acres with all of that grass and cow patties. Think about all of the carbon sequestration that occurred on that 300 acres before it was clear-cut and grazed for cows. So don't think of farm to table or knowing where your food comes from as beating the American food system. It means nothing if the farm you're buying from is contributing toward desecrating the land. Farm to table in theory is great, but it's also not part of the solution to our food system collapsing. Food scarcity is a scary thought that many people think about for good reason, but don't be fooled by their marketing. Expensive, farm-to-table produce cannot and should not alleviate your anxiety. Farm-to-table doesn't mean shit if they're farming on borrowed time/resources, which they are in my humble opinion. Don't even get me started about raw milk. Lastly, their interpretation of farming is cute, but migrant farm workers are still producing a majority of America's food. Ballerina Farm and their copycats are not going to change that. Support United Farm Workers instead, or some of these fabulous organizations. American Farmland Trust, they provided my stats about farmland loss. Young Farmers Coalition, they largely support BIPOC farmers and advocate for equity-focused goals in the farm bills. Native land loss due to settler farms and homesteads. Thank you, Ecotype Specifics, for taking the time to write that out. People dismiss folks like Ballerina Farm as harmless, but they are not. Even if we set aside the farm LARP, collaborating with Evie magazine can send their 10 million followers down a far-right pipeline. And that's it for the 8th day of Tradmas. Thank you so much for watching, and I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. My socials and Patreon are linked below, along with sources and resources, and I'll see you in the next video.